Welcome back to the On the Horizon podcast. Today is a very special episode. It actually marks our 100th episode here at On the Horizon, and I am just so excited and grateful to have finally reached this milestone. Something that is often said is when you start any kind of venture, or especially as a creator, when you start your content creator career, the rule of thumb is to do something 100 times before you can ever expect to see a result. And in doing this podcast 100 times, we have grown and learned so much and spoken to so many incredible people and put out so much information that can help adult creators. And we're learning things from all of you, and we're learning things from all of our listeners. So I just wanted to say a very special thank you to everyone that's been tuning in and supporting the podcast and supporting SWCEO in general. It has been a really cool ride, and it's only getting started. Welcome back to On the Horizon. This is Melrose Michaels. I am your host, and I'm here to share what's worked for me in building my adult creator business to try to make building yours just a little bit easier. Let's get into today's episode. Today's focus is on sexuality and adult media with incredible guest Elle Stanger, who went from managing a porn shop and pole dancing to professional cuddling and writing for major publications like Playboy and Men's Health. Elle's journey is as diverse as it is inspiring, and as someone who has followed her and been a fan for some time, Elle is one of my own personal influences who got me interested in advocacy work. She offers a wealth of experience and a unique perspective on sex education, harm reduction, and the nuances of the adult industry. Elle has published Nude Online in 2005 and has worked in adult entertainment and touch work since 2009. They featured in Inked Magazine, Playboy, Hustler, Rolling Stone, and have written for Men's Health, Romper, Thrillist, Huffington Post, and more. You may have seen them on Pornhub or heard them on the Savage Lovecast or Vice or on a stage in Portland. So Elle, thank you so much for making the time to hang out with us today. This is really exciting for me. I'm a bit nervous because I've followed you forever. So I'm really happy to have you.
Hey, Melrose. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Oh my gosh, your voice is a godsend.
Ooh, thank you. I love when people call me God. I hear, oh, Jesus, and oh, God, just so much. And I love it. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm flattered and honored to be here and be so well thought of.
Thank you. No, yeah, I followed you, especially on Instagram for my personal accounts for a long portion of my career, and you came across my timeline at a time where I was really seeking out ways to give back to the community, and you were a really strong source for me in terms of like education and what I could do, and also becoming more educated myself. So I just want you to know that the stuff you post is meaningful and it's impactful, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way.
Thank you for telling me that. And if I could ask, if you remember, do you remember what year or so it was when you stumbled upon me?
It's hard to say because I'm bad with usernames, right? So I'm looking at the post and I'll have memorable posts, but I don't usually look at the usernames. But when I first came across yours, it would have had to be at least 4 or 5 years ago, I would imagine. Yeah, at least. And
I love to hear what people have been here for.
Yeah. And I think it was an advocacy post, and I remember being surprised because I followed you for a different reason. It was that we actually had a personal thing that you were posting about in common to some degree. So I followed you for that reason. And then I was seeing your kind of educational stuff, and I was like, oh, this really resonates. And then I, did the whole creeping your timeline and became
Hell yeah. That's what it's for.
Yeah, I love that. So can you kind of tell us and give some background for those who maybe are less familiar or haven't stalked you to the lengths I have about how you got started in adult entertainment and in the industry, and kind of what drew you to it, I guess, initially?
Yeah, I've always been just a very sexually interested and aware person. And that looked like, when I found my parents' pornography at like 7, 8, I remember thinking like, oh, adults, this is what adults are into? Like, adults are so weird, but I'm curious. And then I was like, wow, is my body going to look like that when I get older? And masturbation was always a self-soothing for me. When I became a teenager, I wanted to be touching and hooking up with my peers, other preteens and teenagers. of different genders. And interestingly enough, I had more early sexual experiences with fellow female children because a lot of the boys were just like too immature and not interested. So ended up then dating in high school, boyfriends, girlfriends through high school. I got married the first time really young, just an anxious romantic. 22. We're still friends. I got married again at 26, still an anxious romantic, and then I put myself in therapy. But I just always wanted to learn about sex and fucking and myself and other people. So I worked in adult industry because I applied on a whim and they needed a retail clerk, and that's what I had experience in. And then I just fell in love with learning everything about all the books we sold, the toys, what did the lubes do, people that came in wanting advice or information. And then I really wanted to figure out how to help them. And it feels good. One of the things I realized I really enjoy is I feel good when someone asks me advice and I tell them what I think and they tell me it's helpful. That's like the best compliment someone could give me, is that I was helpful to them. So yeah, so I just was doing sex retail, and then I kept hearing that I was so pretty, I should audition somewhere to dance, because at that point I was living in Portland, Oregon, where the strip club capital of the world per capita, small population, lots of clubs. And then the recession, well, the one of 2008, 2009 happened, and then I couldn't work normie retail anywhere. I'd also worked as a clerk in pharmacies, and I had done some unlicensed hospice care and some volunteer work in a nursing facility. And I couldn't get hired anywhere. I couldn't get hired at a Walgreens. I couldn't get hired at a Hot Topic. But I started researching strip clubs, found one that looked small and comfortable enough, and would hire someone who looked like me, which was very slender and lots of tattoos, which I later found out is a thing lots of people like, and people like lots of types of bodies. So throughout getting comfortable with stripping, it was going to be a temporary thing. I thought maybe 6 months at the most. And then 15 years later, except for COVID shutdowns, it's my favorite job. Stripping is still such a challenging, but such a personally rewarding job. And it's opened the doors into doing webcam, making porn, escorting phone sex, dominatrix work now I'm aging into. And then at some point, I had built a network of not only sex workers and entertainers, but clinicians and therapists and professionals that I had met through the kink world or swinger parties. And one of them told me, it was a fellow sex educator. He's no longer educator and we're no longer friends, but he told me, I think you should really go through this program. I think it would be good for you. And the program was Institute for Sexuality, or ICE for short, ISEE. But instituteforsexuality.com. I still love to refer people there, and I'm now a part-time instructor, which when I entered into the program for sex educator certification, because they do educator certification and therapist certification, I didn't know if I was going to be allowed to be certified because of my previous erotic adult experience. And I was told by the program director at the time that I was the first out sex worker they had. Surely not the first one ever as a student, but the first one out. So now it's great. I'll still speak on panels or get to teach or listen in on trainings. And there's so many other clinicians, therapists, counselors that do have erotic backgrounds. And it's really informed their work and made them more compassionate and less horophobic.
That's amazing. I think that it's really interesting that you were the first out sex worker, or with, sex worker background. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the
Coming through their
educator.
program, because for me, or maybe for our community, it would seem so logical to go into, that kind of work and to use that past experience in that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
So, but obviously the stigma still exists, right? The whorephobia still exists.
Right. And I want to say, again, the program director, she clarified, she said, I'm sure we've had more, but you are the first one who came to me, I came to her and said, is this going to be a problem? If I'm trying, when I said, I want to be certified by the larger organization, AASECT, AASECT, which is the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. I said, if I apply to them, will they even accept me? Is it worth doing all this work? And I did, and here we are. And, there was a couple other people that I heard about in like 2018, 2019, who were out about doing sex work, or they were still currently doing it and they were a licensed or certified professional. I don't know her personally, but Raquel Savage was like one of the first people where I'm like, oh damn, okay, there's more people out there that are out and it's okay and they're making it work.
That's
So
amazing.
it's been very interesting, uncharted territory, and it's so rewarding, honestly. I remember eating tingles in the program, like sitting there and learning a lot about physiology, dysfunction, function, history, stigma, but also sitting amongst people who had been seeing clients professionally, again, as therapists or clinicians, for maybe years or even a couple decades, and they had never talked with a sex worker that they knew of before, or they'd never seen trans porn or imagery before. And I thought, oh my God, this is why so many people in our communities, queer, sex work, kinky, trans, cannot go see professionals, because the horophobia is so deep in a lot of professional, so-called, higher respectable educated work. So a lot of what I do is just go into, very normative spaces and try to figure out where the biases exist. And it's usually not hard. You can see them. And then that's my goal, to give feedback or direction. So I do this as a consultant for a couple anti-trafficking organizations who are the better for it now, and I love them. And then I'll do one-on-one consulting with counselors, therapists. And I have to say, my own therapist, who I've had personally before I started this journey and then throughout, she's great. And I got very lucky with how I found her and screened for her. But I've also had to, correct her language or reframe some things a few times. So it's okay that people don't know about our communities, but I have the ability, and some of us have the ability, like yourself, to educate them. So here we are.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And I think like as long as people are open to having those conversations and being informed or allowing new information to kind of come into the conversations, that works really, really well. And I find too, like in my day-to-day conversations, even with like just friends, family, what have you, like there's almost always an opportunity to better inform them from our, lens and from our community, just so that they can have these conversations and go forth into the world being a little bit better for having spoken with me about it or with, other
Mm-hmm.
creators.
Yes.
So when you're talking about a SECT certified sex educator, what does that mean? Like what specific things can you educate on? What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah. So it's a big long one. So it's ASECT, certified sex educator, and that's aasect.org. So if you are looking for an educator or a counselor or therapist in your area, you can look at their directory. And this is an organization that's recognized internationally. If you live in the States or Canada, then you probably want to get certified by them. And if you're going to a program that says it's certifying you, you will want to ask them, does ASECT include you? Like, are you ASECT certifiable? Are your classes ASECT worth any ASECT credits? Otherwise, you're probably wasting your time. So I went through 4 specialized training years, 2 at the Institute for Sexuality, and then 2 on my own, but under the supervision of a mentor or supervisor that is also certified by ASECT, teaching and showing what I'm teaching. And that can look like writing classes, radio, anything that's documented. So I studied for 2 years and then taught for 2 years while studying. And I became certified, I believe, in 2021, a few months after the suicide death of my beloved partner. So it was quite it felt like a big success because it had been an extra, extra hard road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you got to know me before the loss of Brian, then you may remember him, or if you hear about it after. But that was a huge part of my professional and personal career. So I am certified to offer information and resources. I am not a therapist. I cannot ethically, and I do not prescribe different like practices or therapeutic changes or suggestions. I give you information and resources. And if I can't, then I'll refer you to someone who can. And I do refer to therapists when I think that's what people are looking for, what they need. I do offer consulting, and I can do coaching where I can give you my opinion on what I think. But again, I am not a therapist. I am not a counselor. I just love to work in conjunction with them sometimes.
That's amazing. Your I guess kind of philosophy emphasizes learning from a diverse audience and being completely objective about sexuality information. How do you integrate this into your teaching or into your consulting, for example?
So that can look like removing the stories that we've told ourselves. And this is different than noticing or ignoring patterns. So what that means is sometimes people will have a fear or a concern, like my partner doesn't want to, do this XYZ sexual thing with me, or my partner's, shy about this thing or whatever. And then the person has a concern and they'll say, I think this is because, and it could be right, or it could be totally based on their own insecurities and history. So being very objective means just looking at the information we know, not building story. The work of writer Brene Brown actually has been really helpful in helping me start sentences with, the story I'm telling myself is, can you tell me if that's actually happening? So this is a thing I encourage people to ask their partners sometimes if they're having a confusion. And so to model that, what I said once to a partner is, the story I'm telling myself is that you're not attracted to my vulva, and that's why you don't go down on me very much. And what was actually happening is his nose hurt from his nose ring and getting hit in the face from boxing, and he was embarrassed, so he didn't want to go hurt his nose further, and he was just avoiding going down on me.
Wow.
So just little, like, very direct, unbiased communication can be very helpful. And this is something that a lot of people will avoid at all costs because it can be awkward and painful, and I get that. Something that I also have noticed a lot is that I am very wrong about what I might think about someone all the time. And so this can mean if I have a client and based on what they're telling me, I might imagine that they're into something specific, just for example, and then later I find out I'm totally wrong. They're into something totally different. This comes up a lot because I notice people tend to assume that or hope that their partners are into what they're into. And often people really ignore the opportunities they have, or they avoid the opportunities they have to explore or to ask what their partners are into. A lot of people try to just assume compatibility, and that's why they get confused when things aren't working, in my opinion.
If you're enjoying this podcast episode so far, please take one moment to share it with another one of your adult content creator friends, because you know what the rule is here. We do not gatekeep, and we want to make as many adult creators' businesses as easy as possible. And you sharing this episode with them might do exactly that. Thanks so much in advance.
So again, this is like, if I think someone needs to talk to a therapist and figure out what's really going on with like their history, their relationships, their surroundings in a way that I can't help them, I'll refer them out. But it's really amazing how many people come to me with what they think is a very complicated problem. And it turned out it's a very common problem. One last example I'll give is a lot of people will say to me, I can orgasm when I masturbate, or I can get close, but I can't do it with a partner. There's something wrong with me. And actually, this is such a common thing because the reason you can probably orgasm when you're by yourself is because you don't have any stress or pressure of trying to please someone or wondering what they're thinking, or also pleasing them. So just like a lot of people just really need like an hour to name a couple things that are bothering them. And then if they get information on it, whether it's like quantitative studies and data, or it's qualitative, and that means other people's stories that they're okay to share, that can be so helpful.
I think it's so common for us to blame ourselves or for anything that we think we're failing at. Like even the example you just gave, I can envision so many, female identifying people listening to this episode later and being like, oh, that's me. Like just identifying with that specific thing. So I have so many friends who just don't orgasm, and it's like a topic of conversation. But it's exactly what you described. They can do it alone, but when they get with a partner, it's super difficult, or it never happens. And that's what they do. They just hold it against themselves as if they're broken in some way.
And also stories, from having so many male clients in touch environments where I'm negotiating different kinds of touch, sexual or not, and I'm talking about lap dances, cuddling. I have been very blessed to be very selective about who I do escorting clients with. So there's a little bit more trust and communication there than if I was doing it like much more often. So shout out to the pro-hos that are escorting all the time. That is so emotionally complex and sometimes very dangerous work. Respect to the sex workers that know more than me. But what I have learned is a lot of people will touch me in a way that I don't like, not because they're being malicious, but because they have anxiety or they don't know what to do or they're mimicking something they saw. And this comes up so much for people, I have noticed.
Yeah, I can imagine that, because so much of people's sexual education is not provided or just never actually sought out when they didn't get it through school. Maybe they grew up in an area where that was not something that was in the curriculum, as in most areas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all mimicked behavior from something that's been done to them, or something they
Porn.
saw in porn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
super common.
Yeah. Like choking. People were wondering, why is choking becoming such a normative thing where millennials and then I'm sorry, Gen Z is reporting that a lot of non-consensual choking happens during sex. And this does not surprise me when we've cut off so much access and communication from kids and teens about consent and boundaries and pleasure exploration. But porn and entertainment is so easy to find. And I love me some porn and I make porn, but you have to tell people, FYI, this is not realistic. This has been planned, edited. Often people are getting paid. They're either doing it for money or fun. And I like to use the Fast and Furious example with, we don't drive cars the way you see in the movie Fast and Furious, or more people would get hurt or die. You should not be having sex based solely on what you saw in entertainment. People can get hurt or die.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. That's a perfect example. I know you have a hard stop at the hour, so I'm going to switch gears here because I want to talk a little bit more about your writing and your advocacy and all of the just this general work that you've done. So your writing covers a lot of ground, from your personal experiences to also like the broader social issues. How do you decide what you want to write about? Is that up to you? Is that based on your current experience or whatever you recently experienced? How do you go about that?
Honestly, I think it's just my ADHD. And if I don't have a request or a deadline from someone else, it's like, what is bothering me today? Like, I got 3 messages in a single day about a particular theme, and I can't even remember what it was. But like, that's when I'll be like, you know what? Okay, I think the universe is telling me we need to do a post on squirting or non-consensual choking or like consent in children, because I have like 7 to 9 different jobs that I do. So it's pretty interesting because I could be doing my bikini barista job and I'm thinking about consent and labor and how people can try to exploit you or take advantage of you when they can't even touch you, which is in the coffee stand. And then I'll still be processing that. And then I'll pick up my tween and they'll tell me a story about, someone in class, like harassing them, messing with them, not necessarily touching them, but using some of the same tactics to antagonize. And so I just sometimes notice parallels of like, this is such a problem in the world, this thing or these themes. And I want to talk about it. And what's so gratifying is when I talk about something that is a problem, so many other people will agree and or say, I never thought about it like that. Or I think about this all the time, but I haven't seen it said before. It's not like I'm inventing new ideas all the time, but my autistic ADHD brain notices patterns and loves puzzles. So if we can talk about how children in school that aren't taught consent grow into adults that don't respect consent, then let's do it.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And those themes they have so many intersections with different kinds of labor, different kinds of just things people experience in daily life. It doesn't even necessarily have to be involving sex explicitly, to your point, because consent as a general idea is in many things. And that's often a conversation I find myself having too with, people outside my community. Is like, we'll talk about consent and people associate that word with sex, but they don't associate it with many other common things. And that's when it gets really interesting and informative, I find. I love the fact that you are inspired by these themes and you just add them into your work and your writing. Has any of this, it also influenced your advocacy? Has like something you've written then, motivated you to take a certain action in terms of advocacy or to drive a certain behavior with your advocacy?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Everything creates ripples and effects. And it's sometimes the reaction to something that's written then will give a new realization of something else that needs to be talked about. So I mentioned earlier the death of my partner. And, I said earlier I'm an anxious romantic, but of course, universe, this was the first relationship that was actually like very secure and had except for his depression and his self-harm, which he understood very uniquely and documented throughout his life. So I became more grief literate and suicide aware. And every single person, every single circumstance is different, but I noticed themes and patterns. So one of the things that my beloved deceased Brian was very vocal about was that poverty was incredibly crushing to his physical, mental, psychological health. And it made, him hopeless, and it made him unmotivated, and it made his chronic pain hurt worse. And then when we talk about the epidemic of suicides in people our age or younger, like never before, and scientists are asking themselves why, I already named the reasons why that Brian had been naming for years. And it's, again, poverty, hopelessness, worried about the future, instability, pain that's already so bad at the age of 30, but the only options you're given are to go on pain pills and develop an opioid addiction or physical therapy that a lot of people can't afford. So after Brian died, and I wrote about it, the path to his destruction, and why also so many men hurt themselves or people around them and themselves because they are frustrated, they want to be heard. And there's a lot of people that need resources for mental health, and I don't mean to focus on men here, but if we want to understand why people keep hurting people, we have to, again, look at the feedback we're getting. So when I shared about, part of the reason he died was these reasons that could be socially prevented, literally prevented, if we invested into the care of the people who need it most, I received a lot of understanding and gratitude from people who had also experienced suicide loss or suicide ideation. And also, I noticed very uniquely a lot of specific shaming from people that told me that it was my fault he died, and that obviously I didn't love him and he didn't love me if he would choose to do that. And a really common misconception is that people who die by suicide are choosing to do this in a right mind. And a lot of people are choosing to do something because they don't know what else to do, and because sometimes they feel like their absence would be doing other people a favor. That's the thing that really, really shocked me about this, is that so many people did share with me after I said, Brian didn't mean to hurt us when he died. He literally thought that we would be better off without him. And so that's something a lot of suicide survivors would be helped to know, because it helps remove any shame that they could have prevented things, whether or not they knew, So yeah, everything is connected. Parenting is connected, self-esteem, health, poverty, labor rights, sexuality, self-identity. So, I guess I'm just going wherever just surfing the waves of life and see where they take me, and then we talk about it.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you spoke so heavily on this, because that's actually when I first started following you, was when you were posting about Brian. And then I was relating to just kind of the grief and the things you were experiencing. I have a very close friend who lost her partner as well, and not to suicide, but something else. But I met her at a time in my life, and we trauma bonded in our own way. And it all kind of seemed serendipitous, because these things were all kind of happening when I found you and found her, and all of this at the same time. So I think that was the first thing that drew me in about your content, was that you're so open and so vulnerable about what you were going through. And then parallel to that, you were also offering these other things that I related to as a member of the community, and through the education that you put out. So I think that's what drew me in. And then to see the advocacy work you were doing and the things you were doing around all of these themes that were just naturally kind of playing out in your life was really beautiful, because I'm a big fan of when people can, harness pain or hurt and turn it into these beautiful, useful, valuable things. And that's what I feel like you've done really well, like in an exemplary way. So it makes sense that these things would influence your career and your work 100%.
Thank you.
The other thing that stood out to me is like your podcast has gotten significant recognition. And that's something I'm particularly bad at in terms of what we do. I like to talk about things that I find interesting or I could might provide our community value, but then it's not necessarily what makes a podcast a good podcast, I'm finding. So I'm curious what you think has really set them apart and helped support your career and then the missions that you're on.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think you're doing a fabulous job and could have fooled me. You look so streamlined and professional. And no, I mean, I was to say, you give me tips. Honestly, I had a good, supportive local start in Portland. My first podcast, which I won't name, had a really, really good following. My second podcast, Strange Bedfellows, also had a really great following. And we got voted best Portland podcast. So I think that kind of gave us a little kick in visibility. I was also very active in a couple ways online besides Instagram. And I was just starting to do porn making on CamSoda. I'm camsoda.com/stripper writer. I haven't updated clips in a while. I really need to. But I will say that all of that happened. We rode a nice little success podcast wave, and I was really hopeful and optimistic about building to a bigger spot than I am now. And then FOSTA-SESTA happened in 2018. Some of you know FOSTA-SESTA was bad legislation that supporters said would make it harder to traffic people and also hit them with harsher penalties. It actually made it harder to find traffickers because they conflate basically a lot of adult work with potential obscenity and liability. So when FOSTA-SESTA passed, it changed the way the websites and the internet functions for the first time in like 20 years. And the internet's pretty new, okay? It's like 30, 40 years. But Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in 1996 was written about the fact that platforms and websites are not responsible for the material their users publish. I agree with this, and this is the way it has functioned. So what that meant was you go on Reddit, I go on AOL chat, whatever. We say, ridiculous stuff. The moon landing never happened, whatever. Kaczynski was right. And then it means that's just our opinion, whatever. Now, technically, anything you publish on Reddit is responsible for. Facebook is responsible for. Twitter is responsible for. It's not possible to moderate or police all of this content. So what the apps did is anything that could be related to prostitution, aka trafficking, because to them it's all the same, they just started banning people that were related to sex work. Because at a glance, you can't tell if someone's being trafficked or working consensually. You often really cannot. And this is the same thing with relationships. You cannot usually tell at a glance who is in a safer relationship or who's experiencing domestic violence. Sometimes there's like obvious, let's say bruises or something, but we don't live in an SVU world. Life is more complex. So platforms are afraid of being held liable for the content and the material their users publish. So this looks like, why do the OnlyFans models get kicked off? Why do, the hot girls or the black queers or the fat gays, why are they getting targeted? Besides discrimination, because that already exists, if they have anything related to adult content, in theory, if they're being trafficked, the app is responsible for it. The app doesn't want to deal with it. The app has it in there to kick people off. Not Playboy or the Kardashians, though. They can have tits out all over the place. The apps are fine with that because they figure for some reason these people are so famous that it's more lucrative for them to keep them on. But as we know, anyone can be forced to work or do labor for their family. Like Britney Spears, poor thing, was making money for her dad and his cronies for like a decade and a half. So SESTA FOSTA was a really, really bad idea that made the internet a harder place to navigate for small creators like you and me. Didn't really change a lot for the bigger creators. But we also have a lot of anti-porn people and legislation that's popped up much more since the Trump presidency in 2016. And this ties into what's going on now with Project 2025 and how some of that is so detailed they want to not recognize any marriage except for like a man and a woman, or maybe even to have kids. Any trans content would be marked as obscenity and therefore pornographic. So the internet's gotten a lot more difficult and challenging just to advertise on. And I think that's why, I know that I'm suppressed big time. Twitter was shadow banning me so hard for like 3 years. You couldn't find me unless you copy pasted my URL.
Yeah, we actually just got our search ban lifted not too long ago out of the blue. And it's made such a huge difference. And that so many creators will come to us for like just education. How do I get more traffic? How do I get more clicks? And I think that that's a big piece of the puzzle that it goes unrealized, is that the internet as we know it presently is not the same internet 10 years ago that when I launched my career. The visibility is different now. Everything is different now. The rules have changed, so to speak.
I'll tell you, yeah, my numbers are quite crap. And it's hard, you might experience this too. It's hard to not feel like a personal failing. Like I know my content is good, the work is good, it helps people when it can reach them. But when you see that your insights, so for example, on my platform, at the worst shadow banning I had like 160 something thousand followers. I don't buy my followers and I try to avoid bots. So let's assume most of them are human and a lot of them speak and understand English. So they'll be interested in the written spoken content I publish. Okay. For those who don't, there's the visual. That's fine. I had 50,000 imprints in 1 week, which is very bad. And then when Instagram changed something, it went back up to like 230,000 in 1 week. So if you're relying on visibility to make money and get booked, and sell bookings or write articles, you can imagine how much that's going to impact your bottom line if people can't even see you.
Yeah, entirely. When maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when I first got verified on Instagram randomly through just their approval process.
Nice.
But I was going, when my verification hit and I got the check mark, my posts were getting 40,000 likes again. And then 2 days later, after getting the check mark, I got shadowed, or whatever you want to call
Shadow
it, again.
ban.
Yeah. And then I'm down to getting like 1,000 likes per post, and my story's only getting a couple thousand views. And I'm just like, wow, reality of how that impacts the business is huge. And if it was happening to every other mainstream business, like, the world would look different. People would be up in arms. But of course, since it's us and whorephobia exists, it's not the same. Which I guess that would be kind of a nice area to go into too, because we've spoken a little bit about how, when you were going through your education, you went straight to, I forgot what you said, the title.
Institute for Sexuality?
Yeah, her title, the woman you approached to ask if it was okay, or to just let her know.
So her name is Dr. Roz DeShavo, and she is the founder of IC. Yeah.
Oh, well, you went right to the top.
Yeah, she was teaching, yeah.
That's awesome. So when you doing something like that, you're navigating what we all kind of know as like the stigma and the whorephobia that exists in these systematic ways, especially in education and other areas of life. But how do you feel about, I guess, whorephobia in present day and the stigma in present day? And are there things you continue to come up against, even though you are so open and outspoken and so kind of, I guess, accomplished now?
Oh, thank you. It really, every single time I work, I have to just make peace with the fact that, especially if I'm in the strip club and there's like dozens of other people around me that are intoxicated and interacting, I'm going to see stuff I'm not going to like, and I'm going to see stuff that's going to bother me. And people are going to come to me with things that they want to disclose or vent about. And it's really hard to not carry them home. And I will just make a vague example. Recently, one of my coworkers who has disclosed a history of being a survivor of a few things, she was taken advantage of by a customer in the lap dance room. I also had this customer, but I had a different experience with him because I'm a different person and he didn't try the same crap with me. And that's just a perk of me being, I think, older and more experienced. He would have tried it on me 10 years ago. So I think, so he touched her in ways that she was not consenting to. She had a freeze response. He did end up getting kicked out, which is nice because some venues will not kick out people that steal from you or touch you in ways you didn't agree to or insult you or threaten you. That's terrible. That's a serious problem. Predatory venues are a very real problem. And when you work in them where you have supportive staff and management, they're not so much a problem, and you see how great it can be when places respect consent. But individuals are still going to have their own opinions. So it's the club policy that she can have this person kicked out for touching. Okay, and he was. One of the bouncers made a comment to someone else that she does other work, so what's the big deal?
Wow.
Right. And so me, as someone who also has done like pro whoring, escorting, again, privileged and safer, that really bothers me because now I know something about him and the way that he sees us and the way he sees our victimization. And I also wonder if it had happened, if something had happened to his girlfriend, wife, partner, would he care more? Or would he not blame her so much because she was in a different situation? Either way, someone shouldn't touch you in a way that you didn't consent to, or a way that you specifically said was not on the table. So just little things like that. Or sometimes, sex workers, as you know, will shame each other about pricing or activities or safety precautions or lack of safety precautions. And that can be very ugly to see too.
That's one that I come across even just in social media conversations that kills me like internally is like the infighting or the internal shaming of other sex workers. I struggle with that so much just because the for me like there's so few people on our side, so few people moving our needs and like our decriminalization and like things that matter to us, lobbying for our causes forward, that when I see other creators or sex workers doing it to each other, I feel like that's like the worst. Like that's the I don't know the levels of this that there
Mm-hmm.
are. It's when it's us doing it to each other that seems to hurt the most, in my opinion, and also
Mm-hmm.
hurt our goals and our causes. Do you
Yeah.
see that often within your work or different? Because you do the barista, you do stripping, you do everything. Do you see that commonly?
All the time, all the time. It really sucks. I think when everyone's hurting, we're more critical and competitive with each other. And when I say hurting, I mean Portland has a bad local economy right now. We've had a huge flight of people moving out and investors moving out. Unfortunately, Portland got some really false and misinforming press saying that it was on fire and a very dangerous place to be by people who were politically motivated to spread that misinformation. And I'm talking about Fox News, MSN, BC, CNN, ABC. Like, the news is there at this point often to garner more views, and that's more revenue. And also, I want to note that you'll see this with journalists too. If there's a shooting or a stabbing in any proximity to something like a strip club, they'll throw that in there. Even if it was at the gas station across the street and had nothing to do with the strip club, a lot of times they know that the word strip club will get them more clicks, and that's good for ad revenue. So it's been frustrating here, but I see and I hear people talking about, this coffee stand does XYZ and we don't because we're better, or this club charges this amount and those girls are nasty, so this is why we charge this amount, or do blah, blah, whatever. I work in some clubs where there is full service and prostitution stuff going on in the lap dance areas, very discreetly, but I noticed, and I also have, the same clients in there, so I get solicited in a different way. And there's been a couple instances of me finding, condom wrappers laying around. So that can be also very normative in some venues, depending on where you live. But it's something that like I see an increase of movement and activities in a way that I never noticed in the previous 10, 11, 12 years here. And I myself, I'm doing all kinds of work and putting up with more shit, I have to say, because the money's kind of bad. And this isn't an invitation for anyone to fuck with me or try me, but so this is me having an awareness of like, I see sex workers from around the country, around the world posting their money or talking about their FinDom successes. And I understand that a lot of us, I do it too. We have to perform affluence in order to attract affluence. So a lot of us are going to brag or show the silver lining good parts because it looks better. This also can make other sex workers feel really bad. Like, why can't I do that? Why can't I make a rack every time I work? So just if any advice to anyone listening, like keep your eyes on your own prize. You figure out what you need to take care of yourself or nest egg or set away. Don't worry about what your coworkers are doing. You don't know what they're actually charging. You don't know what they're actually putting up with. You don't know what their costs are. Just keep your eyes on your own prize.
That's the perfect like advice piece I think that we could have ever left off in, because when you're looking elsewhere, you are literally not moving your own stuff forward because you can't do both.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who said it originally, but it was like you can get busy or you can get rich or something to that effect. And I love that because it's like, don't be distracted. Just focus on what your own goals and efforts need to be in pursuing them. So
Joanna Angel, I want to say real quick, Joanna Angel said something on when she came on my podcast, They Talk Sex, and she said that hate comments and people talking crap is just kind of like bad drivers on the road, where she's like, I have my hands on the wheel and I'm just like on doing my own thing. Like
Come
I'm
on.
keeping my eyes on the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Eyes on the road, eyes on the prize. Absolutely. Well, this has been amazing. I'm so grateful to have had time to chat with you. Like, this is something I've looked forward to all week. And I'm sure
Me
so many
too.
people listening did too. Where can people find you, your work, everything?
Yeah, so find me on stripperwriter.com. That's my two main gigs at the time that I made that website and kind of continues on stripperwriter.com. I'm also on Instagram, still at stripperwriter. On Twitter here, I'm at Elle Stanger. My name is Elle Stanger. That's my real last name. I looked it up. It means strong pole. So my name basically means she, they, strong pole.
I love that. I love that.
Etymology is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So find me all over those. And then also theytalksex.com is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, They Talk Sex Podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elle. Thank you for coming on and making the time.
Thank you, Melrose.
All right, guys, as we start to wrap up, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who has used, tweeted about, and just shared with friends everything to do with GPTs. If you haven't already heard, we released an uncensored NSFW AI GPT to help you generate anything you need for your adult business, and it's made specifically for adult creators. It can give you content ideas. It can help you write bios. It can help you draft DMs. It can do all of the things and act as an extension of you as a creator. Now, if you haven't already given it a try, you can do so completely for free at gpts.ai, and you can claim your free trial to start putting it into use. If you have any feedback or want to give us any questions, suggestions about the product, please tweet us at SWCEO or at GPTsAI. We would love to keep making it better for you. If you're already using GPTs but want more tips, advice, and support around it, especially like updates on new features, etc., you can join us in our closed creator community, the CEO Society. We have been sharing our favorite prompts there, just success stories, ways we've made money using GPTs, and it's a positive, completely drama-free space where we are sharing all kinds of tips, tools, and resources. We keep each other accountable and we support each other through our ups and downs in business. It's a really lovely corner of the internet. So if you would like to join us, you can do so there at ceosociety.app. And I'd love to see you in our spaces and our co-working sessions. If you're not a GPT's user and you are still in the, PDF download phase of your career, you can get any of our content calendars or scripts over at sexworkceo.com/shop. Those are available to you, even some other things like unlocking sales scripts and sales objection scripts so that you can close the deal with fans and PPVs. We even have some freebies at our website available for you if you'd like to try some without spending a dime. Last but not least, I want to take the moment to draw your attention and remind you all listening about SWCEO Data, my other company, in case you're not familiar. SWCEO Data is basically on a mission to survey adult creators like you. We want to hear your feedback about challenges you face and how the adult industry can better serve your needs. Our goal is to collect your experiences, opinions, and observations about the current state of the adult industry, and then we use this data to advocate for necessary changes to make it better for us, the creators. Because the reality is a lot of the people in power have never been creators or simply don't have the lens to know what our needs are. So I'm hoping that SWR data can be that lens. However, I obviously can't do it alone. I genuinely need your help. So for that reason, we are inviting any creator who's willing to participate in our qualifying survey, which helps us understand your specific expertise as a creator. And then by taking that survey, you can start participating in future paid surveys. And our goal is that the CEO squad could have an additional income stream through just surveys alone. So your experience as a creator is valuable, and I personally think it's time you got paid for it. If you're interested in participating and getting paid on future surveys, please comment on us to let us know, and we will DM you the link to the qualifying survey so you can help us in this mission. Lastly, but most importantly, I want to emphasize everything we put out here on SexWorkCEO. We do so for free because we believe in this idea that the more financially successful creators are, the more resources we will have as a community to do things like lobbying Congress, impact policy, organize, and more. So if you found value in the content you heard here today or the tweets that you've engaged with, please consider sharing them to make the journey easier for your own adult creator friends. Our only ask is that you retweet and share our stuff so that we can help as many people as humanly possible. Now that's going to bring us to the end of today's space. Thank you everyone who did join in. We do release these spaces into blog posts over on our website, so if you want to refer back to anything, you'll be able to do so at sexworkceo.com. So thank you again for joining us, CEO Squad, and I will see you a week from now. Thanks, guys.
It would be absolutely incredible If you rated this podcast 5 stars and left a little review, we want to get this podcast to as many adult creators as possible, and you taking a second to leave a couple stars and a review really helps us do that. Thanks so much.